All right. Hello. Welcome. I'm Bill Patton. Welcome to Practical Neuroscience number one. Yep. That would be 11. This would be one. All right. So today we're going to talk about multivariate decision making. All right. And these videos will probably become the source of a future book. But right now, I'm tackling topics in no particular order. Um, so it could be that in the future, I put these in a logical order that one thing moves into the next thing somehow. All right. But multivariate decision making is a very important thing because obviously, in any kind of open ended sport, then decision making is huge. Right. And I was just reading something, I was just listening to somebody talking about how certain people have all the physical skills to perform as a quarterback, but they lack the decision making ability. They lack like the interpersonal skills of leading people and that kind of thing. So this kind of plays into that. Now let's apply this to tennis, because a tennis player has to be able to make many decisions very quickly and then execute really well. So because this is we're gonna go a little bit off on a tangent, and then we're gonna try to bring it back into some really practical things. So I see I have 2 people watching me live. Congratulations, thank you. Put your questions in the thing and whatnot. And then also there's going to be a webinar coming up. I will be announcing a webinar soon, and that'll be like a 90-minute thing for like $10 or something like that. It's going to be awesome, and we could be able to have some discussion and question and answers. All right. So the first thing is foraging, right? So I'm going to put a link to the study that this is from in the YouTube description. So if you're following me, if you subscribe to me on YouTube, you will see the link to that study. All right. So because what happens is, when you're foraging, right, then you're trying to select, from a field of things, what are you going to do? And so, like, for instance, you're at the supermarket, and so you're foraging for the best line to get into. And maybe you just go straight to the shortest line. Okay, fine, right? But maybe you're going to the shortest line, and then you see that someone has their cart filled with items. Okay, wait a second, take another quick scan, and then you go, oh, look, there are 3 people there, but they each only have 3 items. So I'm gonna go there because they'll be quick. All right, so that's an example. And then when you're on a tennis court and you are about to hit a shot, before you've hit the shot, then you need to have sort of selected, you have to have foraged for the shot that you're going to hit. And in the field of your opponent's game, you need to identify, where are the best places to go? Where can I get a point more easily? So it's a really important thing. Now, the study and many studies from neuroscience come from mouse brains. All right. So I know as soon as I said mouse brain, like some of you are just like, I'm out of here. Right. And that's fine. Goodbye. But stay with me, because, if we look at, the fact that the human brain is much more complex than the mouse brain, then it's really not too much of a reach to say if we can identify these processes that are happening in a mouse brain, that in the human brain, it's just more complex, right? There are more structures. There are some deeper things that are happening there. The other thing I think that's really good about studying, lower forms of life and whatnot, is that really as a performer in sports, we really ought to be tapping into the mid and lower portions of our brain more often. And we're going to get into that more later. All right. So one of the exciting things about neuroscience is that the ability for imaging to take place has gone way up. So now they're able to scan and see in real time um, these cascading fields of energy going through the brain, and which structures do they go through when certain things are happening. So they can see much more accurately what the functions of certain parts of the brain are. Although, being very conclusive about that is difficult. All right, so basically, the study talks about how they put the mice in a situation where they had to try to find water in a virtual reality thing, and how the mice went through these different behaviors, and how their brains did different things, and they actually found that a mouse can calculate simultaneously multiple different decisions. And so that's an interesting thought, because I'm guessing also that simultaneously our brains are calculating much more than that. But what we really want to do is we want to bring it back into the most simple decision making. Off the top of my head, I'm not going to name them, but I can think of some players who were so talented. They had every shot in the game. And so they could actually play any way they wanted. They could serve and volley. They could play a touch game and hit drop shots and angles. And, they could hit powerful ground strokes and all this. But they had a hard time focusing into a main style of play. And so those types of players actually have difficulty in performing well consistently, because they don't have sort of a really well-defined, simple A game, so to speak. And so, as a counter to that, then, Rafa Nadal, often says in interviews, when he's asked by not very intelligent journalists, what his strategy was, and he says, I hit a lot of heavy topspin to the backhand. Pretty simple. No. But, Nadal's strategy, is much more a little more complicated than that. And actually it changed over time, because he became a lot more aggressive earlier in the point as he has aged. So the first application is for learning and coaching and parenting is to train simple. And an example would be, especially with a brand new team that I'm coaching, is I want my players to, play some safe serves down the middle of the box, and also want them to hit their first shot cross court almost always. Want that really deeply ingrained in them, that, when the chips are down and they really need a serve, they can play it safely right down the middle of the court. Don't go for too much when you really need a serve, and play that first ball cross court, because it's just the percentages are better. All right. So that's really important, because sometimes people come up on a difficult point, and then they have all these options in their brain that they're thinking about. Right. So, the other day I was training a Division II college player, and, we did some very simple cross court stuff. And then, I started having him hit cross court and down the line. And and then I started to make it a little more complicated than that. All right. So the next application is to train simple +1. But I think what a lot of people do is they train simple +6, and then the decision making breaks down, because it's overly complicated. So, what I did with this young guy is I had him cross court and down the line, cross court, down the line. So I'd give him 4 shots, cross court, down the line. So I'd hit him a forehand, and he hit the forehand down the line, and then he'd hit the backhand cross court, forehand down the line, backhand cross court. Then I would do the opposite, have him hit the backhand down the line, the forehand cross court, and do that 4 times. And then I would have him hit 2 forehands and then 2 backhands. And then I would have him hit all forehands. And then I would have him hit all backhands. And so you can see how, and I don't need to go through every permutation of that, but it was simple +1 because at first I let him get comfortable with the simplicity of being able to hit a forehand and then a backhand and direct those shots. And then I went +1 again by mixing up the shots. So looks like I might have had a little hiccup with my Wi-Fi. So in the comments, let me know if I cut out there, if you missed anything. So now the second thing is to train mixing it up, because if you are so predictable that the player on the other side almost always knows where you're going to hit, then you have the problem of them not having to make more decisions. So an example would be, I like to have my players, keep the ball fairly cross court, but then at an opportune time to them, then I want them to hit a down the line shot when they're inside the court. So they've got to mix that up. Also inside the court, throw in a drop shot, right? Inside the court, go for a sharper angle and mix things up in an advantageous situation. So that's one more way that you can keep the other person, off balance. And it's okay to be predictable as long as your shots are, not very easily assailable. If you're hitting deep cross court shots, you can do that pretty much all day and the percentages are going to be in your favor. But if you're hitting cross court and the ball's landing short and the opponent's coming in, then you've got a problem. And then if we go back to foraging, right, then, you're playing, and as you play, you're looking for what's going on with the other player's game. What kind of ball do they not like? And so, if we go back to train simple, then here's a simple thought. All right. Built to, find out what your opponent's favorite shot is and never give them that. Right. And find out what their least favorite shot is. And then when you need it, then you go there to win that point. So, that's a simple guide to foraging for ways to win. Right. And then if you want to expand on that, you've started to, let's say they really don't like to hit passing shots. They mess up quite often when you come to the net, right? But over time, they start to improve their ability to get over there. They start to see, that you're coming in. So they start moving sooner, and now they're more effective. Then that's a good time. After you've seen that, after you've observed that, then on the next time, then to come in and hit a drop shot going the other way. And then now you just created another decision for them to have to make. And you've complicated their decision making while simplifying your own. And then maybe on the very next point, that you are coming in, you go down the line again, and hit your volley. Okay. So training simple to add one more thing, right? And then, then you can start to mix it up a little bit more, right? Like, one thing with my more advanced players, I want to see them serve and volley a little bit, even if just once or twice in a match, just as a surprise tactic, on on a 40 love game point or the first point of the match, because there's not a lot on the line in the very first point of the match. And as a surprise tactic, if you can close out that game at 40 love, that's a great feeling, and it can leave the other player, sort of at sea. So, now the problem is when you start getting into overthinking. And so this is something that I do a lot. And one thing I've noticed about teaching and coaching since COVID is a real spike in overthinking. So let that sink in for a second. Maybe you've seen that too, but people have had an awful lot of time alone to think things through, and not always in a really healthy way. So sometimes with what I do with my players is I'm like, okay, let's go back to the simple thing, right? Let's go back to that really basic thing, right? So if you're having all these thoughts about all these different things that you need to do, just get your return in, right? I mean, so now if we go to return a serve, the safest thing for you to do is to return the ball back to the server. It's very, very simple, right? And then if you're gaining confidence and you're making a lot of those, now, maybe you can go for a down the line return if you get a weaker serve, or you can go for a little bit sharper angle, or try to hit it a little deeper cross court. So just adding one nuance, and avoid overthinking. So pay attention to if you're starting to think about it a little too much. And it reminds me of the movie Princess Bride, where the villain Vicini says, therefore you, knowing I am not a fool, would clearly not put the poison in front of yourself. All right. So a great way to know if you're overthinking is if you're thinking about what your opponent is thinking. So instead of thinking about what they're thinking, simply observe their behaviors. And so if we go back to that example of, you've been coming to the net and now you see they're getting off to a quicker start and they're performing better. The behavior tells you all you need to know. All right, they've adjusted, they made an adjustment, right? And so now it's time, the next time, to go the other way and make them think about having to move that way instead of this way. Now they have to forage longer. They've got to stop and observe what's really happening here. But making it any more complicated than that can be a problem for me or you or your player, because if they are like, lining it up and they're like, oh, what if they run over here? Oh, wait. Oh, it looks like they made a move to where I was going. Now I'm going to change my shot. And we all know how that works out. So, another thing about keeping it simple is that whatever shot you have committed to, you really have to go and hit that shot, right? Because it's very, very frequent that when people start overthinking and they start trying to change their shot in the middle, a lot of errors come out of that. So anyway, now, a lot of what has inspired this discussion about neuroscience is after I wrote the book Visual Training for Tennis, and people were impressing upon me, and thank you, whoever you are. I mean, I forget who those people were, but quite a few people said, hey, it's more, the brain is the most important body part. And so I was like, okay, yeah, and it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. But, part of it is, that your decision making is coming through your eyes. It's what you're observing. You want to objectively observe what's happening and then make adjustments to your strategy. All right. So go out there, work on multivariate decision making, start simple, add an easy nuance, and then, just be confident that if you mix things up a little bit, that you're creating a problem for your opponent. And it's, you're making it more difficult for them to read what you're going to do. All right. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And I'll be seeing you in another one. And so there was going to be a series of different things happening. Yesterday, I did the athlete-centered coach. Today's practical neuroscience. And tomorrow is going to be something else.